Now you might have noticed a safety pin or two out in this border. When the border is quite large, I'll often use some extra safety pins to make sure that the fabric that isn't quilted, that would have been on the left and right sides as I travel down, doesn't shift a lot. I've got just a few safety pins sporadically placed along the way. Now I've got the excess trimmed, leaving just about an inch of extra batting and backing hanging past the edge of the quilt and the canvas. Here is the backing roller, once again, and I'm going to use the edge of that backing roller, and with my fingertips I'm going to feel it and align it with the edge of the quilt top. So those two are actually in line with each other. Since I know that canvas is straight, that's going to help to make sure my quilt top stays straight. Remember, we talked about the direction of the pins, and you're looking at this today from a left-handed perspective. I'm at the center of my quilt right here, and you would align that center with the center mark on your canvas underneath. So with my fingertips I'm feeling the edge of the quilt and the edge of the canvas. I'm aligning those, and out that first pin is going to come, and then I'm going to stab it right down in, bend that quilt down, and catch the backing and the canvas underneath. Just like that. Now, the important part is to not be a little bit of a wimp and take those pins out and end up putting a pleat or a tuck in that back. Once that first pin is in place, grab the quilt sandwich in the direction you're going to move and tug firmly out away from that pin to make sure the backing is smooth. Pinch it down with your fingers. Feel that backing and batting hanging past. Again, the canvas is in line with the quilt top. Out comes the pin, right back in. Tug, out, in. Tug, out, in. Tug, out, in. One more and I'll be out of camera range. But it's that fast and that simple. That's how it's going to look on the back with the extra batting and backing hanging past the edge. If you need to get very close to the edge of your quilting, just pin that in about 1/8 of an inch rather than 1/4 of an inch. Why does this work? Well, because those pins rode along the entire time and they kept this particular border in line with the body of the quilt, so nothing shifted as you were quilting down. If I would have machine basted that edge, I would have ended up forcing that fabric to walk to one end of the quilt and would have had puckers or a funny point at the other end. These pins help to alleviate that. Remember, once again, I can't emphasize this enough. The points of the quilt's pins go around clockwise for right-handed people, counterclockwise for left-handed people. But whether you're right-handed or left-handed, doesn't matter. Everybody turns the quilt in a clockwise direction. That's because your machine is moving in a certain way and that fabric got pushed over to one direction. You want to make sure you continue that. Once I'm finished with this side, I'll walk to the other side of the machine where I'll attach the fabric once again to the pickup roller, just like this. If you happen to load all of your fabric from one end of your quilting frame, then you just have to decide that those pins that you put in the sides of your quilts will happen to match the direction that you like to turn your particular quilt and where you stand. So think about that for a moment. Wherever you stand to repin, add the side pins as you're quilting so that once the quilt is turned, the pins are oriented correctly for you to take it out. Well, as you can see, I have reattached the quilt to the quilting frame. What would have been the left side of the quilt was turned and now is the top side of the quilt, and the remaining body of the quilt is wrapped onto my backing roller. I'm working very hard to make sure that as I wind it onto that backing roller, things like sashing and seam lines and so forth, you can see the red sashing in this quilt, stay straight along the roller. Since there's extra quilting in the borders but none yet in those empty sashes or squares, I want to make sure that they still stay nice and straight. Eventually I'm going to tighten this up, and then I am going to put the side clamps back on. This is one time where I advise students to put a little extra pressure on the side clamps. Once you clamp out here on the left and right sides, you want to make sure you put as much pressure left and right as you had when the quilt was turned the other way. So put the clamps on, crawl underneath, look under the quilt, and make sure your backing is nice and smooth. When it's smooth, you're ready to go. One last little hint. I'm going to move the camera over just a little bit. You can see that there is a red inner border here, and that this border itself, even though the camera's perspective might be a little bit off, is at least 10 inches wide. Anytime I've got quite a large border, rather than starting at the top and quilting down into things that are already quilted and risking a pleat in the back, I will actually start at the quilting area where I've already completed and work backwards towards the top of the quilt, and then continue rolling down, completing any sashes that hadn't been done before. And when I reach the bottom, I'll quilt down towards the bottom edge. If you have any questions, feel free to visit our website at www.apqs.com, and you can contact me at dawn, D-A-W-N, at apqs.com. Happy quilting!